Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on reducing restraint in the Millcreek Township School District. We're glad to have you join us. My name is Kim Sanders. I am the president of Ukeru Systems and an executive vice president here at Grafton Integrated Health Network. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you know how to best participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your very own computer desktop in the upper right-hand corner. If you're listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio panel and the dial-in information will be displayed. We are eager for this to be an interactive process as much as possible. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing them in the questions panel of the control panel. You can send your questions at any time during the presentation and we will collect them and address them in the Q&A session toward the end of today's presentation. In addition, we welcome you to join us throughout the conversation on Twitter by using #StartsWithYou. A few other items we wanted to make sure that you're aware of. For those of you who need a certificate or continuing education credit for this discussion, we can make that available to you upon request. Continuing education credit is available through Shepherd University with an associated fee of $59. In addition, a copy of this presentation will be distributed in the next few days. We are recording the conversation and will post it on our website later this week. The topic of reducing restraint and seclusion is one that is very important to us here at Ukeru. If you've attended one of our webinars in the past, you know that we believe that all intervention, educational and behavioral, should be built on an approach of comfort versus control. To help make this a reality, we provide training on the conceptual ideas such as trauma-informed care and conflict resolution, as well as a physical technique that minimizes the need for restraint and seclusion. We are not alone in this philosophy. After recognizing the negative impact of the use of restrictive behavior modification techniques, Millcreek Township School District in Pennsylvania took proactive steps to change its culture and eliminate the use of restraint and seclusion in its classrooms. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by two educators who led the way driving the district change. Ed Nientimp is the Director of Pupil Services, and Kate Barbaro is with us, and she is the Special Education Supervisor. Welcome, Ed and Kate. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we are so excited to hear you share your story.
Thank you very much, Kim. We're glad to be here and tell our story. I'm Ed Nientimp, and I'm here with Kate Barbaro.
Hello.
And we're going to take you through our implementation and our change and approach to managing students who were engaging in dangerous behavior to themselves or others, and we're really excited about sharing it with you. So first off, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our school district. Next slide, there we go. We are located in northwestern Pennsylvania on the west coast of Lake Erie. And so we're about as far west PA as you can get, northwest PA as you can get without getting wet or ending up in New York State. We have, you can see our demographics of our district up there. So those of you from school districts might want to compare that a little bit to the district that you're from. But we have 5 elementary buildings, 3 middle school buildings, 2 high school buildings, and 1 building that houses our residential treatment facility students who are living there. Most of those students are from out of district. Next slide. This slide shows our special education population, and we're going to be talking exclusively about working with our students who have IEPs. The 2 groups on the chart here that are most affected or historically in our school district present with behaviors that are dangerous either to students, staff, are our students in need of autism support and students in need of emotional disturbance support. Next slide. So I thought I'd start off by telling you a little bit about our story, our district story, and how we ended up, Kate and I ended up in Winchester, Virginia at Grafton at an Ukeru training 3 years ago. So we have, Kate and I both have had a long history of working in the field of special education, and primarily in classrooms or school programs for students that engage in behaviors that may be dangerous at times to themselves or to others. So we've been doing this for quite a while, the two of us. And here in Millcreek, we've had 10 plus years of a well-established, commercially packaged crisis management system that we've been using here, had been using here, and we're really good at it. Our staff were well-trained and competent, and the more we trained in it, as those of you guys that train in commercial methods know, the better you get at it. I just read a recent study, 2018, there's currently 25 commercial restraint types of programs that are available. And actually the study looked at 17 of them who responded to a survey that really just talked about the common threads of the crisis management programs being, and very typical of the one we have been using. It includes a de-escalation approach. It includes, blocking and escapes from student attacks, and then it includes a restraint. The restraint package we were using utilized least to most restraint, starting with a standing restraint, a seated restraint, and then a supine restraint. So that's kind of our history, what we've been using prior to us going to Ukeru. So, and just another thing about our school district, we have a lot of really good things in place here. So we didn't, and you'll see our data in just a little bit, but we don't have a lot of restraints in our public school settings. We have a strong behavioral approach here. We have a board certified behavior analyst who oversees a lot of our ABA interventions. We use functional behavioral assessment, and all of our schools have a school-wide positive behavior support program. So we have a lot of layers of support for our students. And I would say in the 95 percentile, all of the students in our autism support programs and emotional support programs have an individualized positive behavior support program as well. So we have a lot of good things and have had a lot of good things going on for our students. Next slide. So our motivation, so why the change for us? Honestly, we had a few cases over the last 5 or 6 years where we had parents who had gotten angry about a restraint that happened with their child or their student, angry at staff, angry at the school. It resulted in some litigation. None of those litigations ever ended in any kind of a result due to any kind of improper restraint, but we certainly knew that restraint was an area that was certainly a hot button for parents, and certainly one that we were concerned about. And I know we were convinced that we were only using restraint as a method of last resort after everything else had failed. So we felt sort of good about what we were doing and that we weren't doing too much of it, but even the instances that we were utilizing restraint, we were seeing really negative response from parents and negative responses from students as well. So as the slide says here, again, we were generally satisfied that we were meeting student needs, but we were using a restraint approach. And I did learn about Ukeru in an advertisement or something I saw on the internet caught my attention. And just like all of us, I clicked on the links just to see what they were talking about. And I became very intrigued with the concept of a restraint-free approach, because if we can avoid restraining our students and have our staff avoid doing restraints, which is a win-win for everybody, boy, who wouldn't want to do that? So honestly, I was skeptical that any such program existed, but I was hopeful as well. So as part of my role here as the Director of Pupil Services, I decided that I should sign up and be trained in the Ukeru approach. So Kate Barbaro and I headed down to Winchester, Virginia to the Grafton School to learn about Ukeru and become certified as trainers. And again, we went there. I really went there, to be completely honest with you, as a skeptic. But we can go to the next slide. I'm talking about the next thing. I really went there as a skeptic, thinking that, geez, I don't know that this is possible. I've been doing this for a long time, and it just seems like we've always had those kids that no matter what we did or what we tried, and we tried lots of different things because, you know, we certainly weren't in favor of restraining students, but we always felt like we would get to the end of our rope. So I went there as a skeptic, really thinking I would come back and report to my boss and report to the board of directors that we'd investigated another method, but what we were doing was really superior. So I really kind of went with that attitude. So, and I just for your knowledge, I've been trained in 4 different approaches to crisis management, this being the 5th one, and as an instructor in 3 of those approaches. So I'd had some experiences with other programs, and I felt pretty comfortable with what we were doing. So the first day we went through the training and was really intrigued by the strong emphasis on trauma-informed care, which was something that we weren't doing. Not that we weren't trauma-informed at all, but we weren't certainly to the extent of the training that we went through in our first day at Grafton. And then at the end of the day, I was able to talk with the instructors and review, and I wasn't aware of Kim Sanders' 2009 study that really talks very detailed about the Grafton's effort to reduce restraint over a long period of time, and the results of that study are really impressive. And so those results and also the approach of the comfort versus care approach really struck home to me too, because obviously we're a school district, and really taking a comforting, supportive approach is absolutely something that we would much rather embrace than taking a strong-armed approach, you know, to support students or to seek out compliance. So after our second day of training, which we went through all the blocking and the escapes, and we spent the whole day really doing that, we had a long conversation on the 5-hour drive back. And, you know, honestly, from my position of, I think we have about 80 special education teachers in our school district, and we were pretty set on a long-standing crisis management platform. We really debated about whether we wanted to bite the bullet and do something different, because it's, as those of you guys that are in schools or school districts, or whether it's private or public, it's a big cultural shift, and the training endeavors and all the different processes you have in place, you know, had to be changed. So we talked about it, and by the time we got back to Erie, we decided that we owed it to the students in our school district and the staff in our school district to start working on this change in philosophy and culture. So we started right then. So that would have been the fall of 2016 that Kate and I were initially trained. So we came back and we got to work on how we would go ahead and start implementing this. So we can go to the next slide. And Kate's going to talk to you a little bit about how we implemented this, and then we'll go on from there.
Okay, so as Ed said, we got trained as trainers in Ukeru in October of 2016. So that gave us some time to come back and kind of planfully decide how we were going to try this out and trial it. And we decided on 3 of our most challenging classrooms. And when I say challenging, these had students that had histories of needing physical restraint. The classroom teams were struggling at times, and so just really the high-profile classrooms in our district at the time. And that ended up being 2 autism support classrooms, 1 at the high school level and 1 at the middle school level, and 1 of our emotional support classrooms at an elementary building. And so we implemented for the second part of the school year. So I think we trained that staff at the end of January. So February through, you know, the end of May, we had 11 incidents or times when we used Ukeru, and we had no restraints the rest of that school year. And then moving into the next school year, 2017-2018, we implemented it district-wide in 17 of our special education classrooms, primarily autistic support and emotional support classrooms. And so we're very, very proud of the fact we had 0 restraints last year, and we had 130 Ukeru events with 16 different students. Now we're certainly not saying that all 130 of those events would have ended in physical restraints. And those reported issues, they ranged from, using the pads to block a student that was spitting, or, just maybe a one-hit or SWAT, to students that were actually assaultive and attacking staff. So they kind of ranged. We also reported our use of safe turns, which is one of the Ukeru techniques that kind of replaces having to safe turns. I'm going blank.
Escorts.
Escorts, thank you. Replacing escorts for our students. So we reported all of that, and I used a Google Doc actually to have our staff report those incidents. And it was really kind of a quick, easy, just a couple-minute survey of what happened and what staff were involved and whether it was successful or not. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide.
I'll just talk briefly about the Pennsylvania data. For those of the attendees who aren't from Pennsylvania, we use a restraint information reporting system here that's required by the Department of Education. And this is all of PA data, just to really talk about the big picture here. So in Pennsylvania, over a 3 school year period, you see the 14, 15, 15, 16, and 16, 17 school years there. So what you're seeing there is that's statewide restraint use. I didn't put the numbers on there, and I should have, but in the 14-15 school year, that represents 3,256 students, 15-16, 3,588 students, and then in the last year that we have data for, 4,373 students were restrained in Pennsylvania, and then the blue line talks about the number of times. So in the 16-17 school year, that was 20,580 restraints in Pennsylvania. I put this slide on there just to show even though the incidence of students needing IEPs in Pennsylvania has increased annually between 2 and 2.5% per year, you can see the increase in use of restraint has increased much more than 2% a year. It's increased in between 10 and 22% more students being restrained, and then the number of restraints has increased by about 20% per year. So I just had that slide on there to show that the restraint use in PA is going up and not down. But in our district, we had the opposite phenomenon happen. Next slide.
Okay, this graph kind of shows public school buildings in our district and over this 3-year time period. So if you look at A, that's our baseline data, the year 2015-16. We had about 1,080 special education students, and out of that, 11 students were restrained, with a total of 47 restraints that year, which is pretty typical for us, I would say. The following year, the 2016-17 school year, that is the year we started with our standard program, but then implemented Ukeru with 3 of our classrooms the second part of the school year. So we had a little over 1,000 special education students that year. 15 students were restrained, and that was a total of 35 restraints, so a little bit down. And then finally, the 2017-18 school year, that was when we fully implemented district-wide Ukeru, and we had about 1,132 special education students. 0 were restrained, with no restraints. So, I mean, the data kind of speaks for itself for us. Go ahead, next slide.
This is the best slide.
So we're really looking kind of at the restraints over time here. So if you look at the orange line, that's the number of students restrained. And you can see over the 3-year time period, that goes down to 0 in 2017-18 school year. And then if you look at the blue line, that's the number of students that we used Ukeru with, or the incidence of Ukeru. I'm sorry, the number of Ukeru incidents, that's about 16. So the number of students we were using these interventions with remained the same. It really kind of just speaks to the point that we still had the same amount of students having, a crisis need. We just decided to use something differently to manage it. Next slide. slide.
That's it. It's fine.
Okay.
You skipped one now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you go back one more? Thank you.
Okay, so we're looking at, again, the restraints over the 3-year period that we're talking about. So our baseline, our half implemented, and then last year our full implementation. And you can see the number of restraints going down to 0, and then the number of Ukeru incidents going up. And I know I spoke before and said we don't believe that all 130 Ukeru incidents last year would have ended in physical restraint, but certainly considering a lot of those possibly could have. So again, we didn't stop having problems or stop having students that had challenging behaviors. We really just exchanged or changed the way we were going to manage it and handle it. Next slide.
So in looking at this phenomenon, we have other programs that we're responsible to report to the Department of Education about. And these are the 3 programs that we have oversight over. We have a residential treatment facility in our school district that's for students with significant emotional and behavioral challenges. They actually live on campus there. And then our school district is in charge of providing the educational supports and services for the residential treatment facility. So that's one comparison group. We also have an approved private school in our area where students attend. We send our district students there. We don't send a lot of students there, but we do send about 15 students there a year. And then we have partial hospitalization programs here in the school district. And those are programs operated by a separate entity, but our students are medically prescribed to attend there. So again, we have oversight and reporting requirements for our students attending there. So what we did, and we'll go over this pretty quickly, but we looked at these comparison groups. Really, they weren't really control groups because we didn't randomly assign anybody anywhere, but these students were assigned by their IEPs. So we thought we'd take a look at their restraints over the same 3-year period where we saw a substantial reduction in restraints. So we can go to the next slide, and we'll first look at the RTF students here. So what we have there is you can see the 15-16 school year, 16-17, and 17-18 school year. And again, I apologize. I should have put the numbers in there, but we had about the student numbers were 27, 24, and 45 in each of the school years. And then the restraints went from 183 in year 1 to 179 in year 2 to 432 in year 3. Year 3, the 17-18 school year at the RTF, represented an 88% increase from the prior year. So not only, restraints were being used, they were being used with some level of frequency and a significant increase between year 2 and year 3. And before we move this slide, I just want to share with you one other piece of data that we have. And I didn't get this slide in time for the PowerPoint, but we just met with the staff at the RTF, and we did implement Ukeru in the school-based classrooms over there this school year. And our first 15 days of school data, that's about where we're at, have been extremely promising with a huge decrease in restraints. Last school year, there were 70 restraints in the first 15 days of school. This year, there were 10, and with 9 of those happening outside of the school-based classrooms. So we feel really, it's very promising in our minds that the Ukeru intervention is going to lead to some big changes there. We also saw tremendous increases in or decreases in timeouts and time aways for the students there, which we're attributing to a different approach, the trauma-informed approach that our staff is now employing over there. We can go to the next slide. And again, this is just a table of the same data you just saw, and so you can see the N size at the residential treatment facility was around between 50 and 59 each school year. So we can go to the next slide. These are we can just talk about this briefly. I'm just going to show you a few more tables. So this is the approved private school. Again, we had a small number of students attending there each school year, 15, 15, and 14. But you can see that each school year students were restrained different numbers of times each school year. Next slide. And this is, again, another slide for the students attending the partial program. We don't have as many students attending the partial program, 8, 10, and 10 over 3-year periods. And the numbers of students restrained stayed about the same. And the numbers of restraints were 64, 81. And then, as you see in the 17-18 school year, they were more than cut in half. They were cut down by 63%. So they had a dramatic decrease in restraints in year 3. I'm not really sure. I can't really tell you the reason why that happened. But again, they consistently used restraint. And we can go to the next slide. So the reason I showed you all those, all our comparison groups is we didn't do anything different in any setting other than our public school programs. And the only setting that we saw really the elimination of restraint was in our public school settings, which led us to the conclusion that the only variable that existed was the introduction of the Ukeru platform into our classrooms. And I'd say we probably instructed about 80, 90 paraprofessionals, and administrators. So so we draw the conclusion that restraint, we weren't holding kids anymore. We were using the trauma-informed care, the de-escalation to avoid getting to that point, and then once students got to a point where they engaged in behavior that was dangerous to themselves or others, we used the soft blocking mats that we purchased to make sure that everybody stayed safe, while we continued to extend the opportunity to reach out to support students until they were able to either stop being aggressive or stop injuring themselves. So just in a nutshell, for the schools out there who are thinking about moving towards this approach, for us, we purchased everything from Ukeru and used all the licensed products. It cost us around $1,000 to equip each classroom, which we haven't had to replace any of the materials since we've been using them. They're really well made. It cost us $750 for Kate and I to both train as instructors. Our research are $300 a year. And then we go ahead and train as many of our employees as we're able to or need to. And, honestly, the thing that we're most proud of is we eliminated the use of restraint in our public school special ed classrooms and became trauma-informed care. Again, I told you we just started to expand our programs in a limited way, but we're excited about that. And just another conclusion that I can tell you, I didn't put it down here as a conclusion, but we did have this didn't go over, everybody didn't accept this gracefully. And Kate might want to talk about a little bit of the skepticism.
And we saw skepticism in our trainings. Just some people's attitudes were, this isn't right for our population of students, or yes, maybe that worked down in Virginia, it's not going to work here. Even to the point of people asking, hey, when are we just going to pull the plug on this and just take them down, kind of, to end it, really. So we had a lot of conversations with teachers, administration, and it really was this culture, philosophy, mentality shift that needed to happen. And and now I think our data certainly backs it up, and I think our skeptics have been silenced really with our data here, but it took some time, and I think we've won people over by showing them that it is what's best for kids, and that not just our kids but also our staff. So I spent a lot of time debriefing with teams last year, I think, and Ed will talk a little bit more about this when we get to it, but that is one of the keys, I think, of making this successful for us. After every incident, I would go and talk with teams, and we would role play, and they would hit me up with questions, and sometimes I wouldn't know the answer to. We'd have to work things out, and we'd try different things with different students. It really, one of the things I like about Ukeru is it opens up to kind of individual student planning. What are we going to do for this specific student? How are we going to use the shields next time to protect ourselves? And so a lot of problem solving it lends itself to, and I think that was great opportunities to build connections with staff. And I think overall it's been very, very well received by our staff. So again, I think, like I said, debriefing was huge. Also, I think one of the big game changers was having their leadership believe in it. So they were hearing this from the director of pupil services, from all of their supervisors, from their principals. This was really a belief system. And once people knew why we were going with this, because that whole trauma-informed approach behind it, once people realized the importance of the why, I think people think twice before putting their hands on students now and restraining. So, yeah.
We can go to the next slide, and just to touch on a few things that Kate said that I think are really important. We have a tremendous dedicated staff here, and what we found was that the staff is comfortable with what they know, and this was something complete. Like, we were skeptics as well at the beginning, so it's not a bad thing that people questioned what we were doing, why we were doing it. But some of the things that we were fearful and some of our staff were fearful of just didn't come to be. There was a general fear that students would be reinforced for their bad behavior. But it turns out we're really not talking about bad behavior. We're talking about students in crisis and students who aren't able to control their behavior. So we've seen a shift in mindset. And some of the skeptics have now become some of the biggest cheerleaders, because guess what? Nobody on the giving end of a restraint likes to be there, and if they do, they probably shouldn't be working in this field. So our teachers and support staff will tell you they're so happy that they haven't had to restrain students and haven't had to get into those kind of negative interactions. The last thing I wanted to talk about was, and I found I kind of found this out by accident. I didn't know this when we started out doing this, but the reduction of restraint and seclusion in adult populations and psychiatric hospitals and residential treatment centers is nothing new. It's been happening for 250 years. And it's really settled science. We know it can be done. It's been done effectively many times. And I know you had Dr. Sturmey on for a webinar. In his book in 2015, he goes through a lot of studies that at agencies, and he includes Kim Sanders' study from 2009 that goes through and clearly says it's a mindset, and part of the mindset starts with the administration. And Huckshorn in 2008 identified these principles, as did Scanlon in 2010, that were common themes in the restraint reduction literature, and I think they really applied here. And again, this was unintended, but when we started looking at what we did, most of them applied. As Kate said, this started from the top down. It started with the director and supervisors deciding we were going to make a change in mindset. Our school board and superintendent and assistant superintendent were supportive. We rewrote our behavior management policy, and we included requirements that staff would engage in de-escalation, would engage in Ukeru blocking prior to ever going hands-on with a student. So we actually put that into our policy and shared that with our employees. We always use data to inform our practice, whether it's individual student behavioral data. We certainly closely monitor the use of restraint and the use of Ukeru. So we use data all the time. Our workforce development, I talked about it. We've done we do our trainings in about 1 full day's worth of training for our staff. We do most of the didactic instruction in the morning, and then we do the blocking piece in the afternoon and the role play piece in the afternoon. Kate did an excellent job. I don't know that we missed any Ukeru utilizations or interventions that we didn't go out and sit down and talk with the staff about how it went, how they felt, talked about things that went well and could go better. And of course, I already told you, we were required to have prevention pieces in place, antecedent strategies and consequence strategies, certainly under the umbrella of applied behavior analysis. The only principle that wasn't part of our project here was family and consumer involvement in planning. We did this really, it was really an administrative push to move in this direction, and we haven't involved families and parents, and perhaps we should have. So I think that's it, other than references, and then time for questions.
Ed and Kate, thank you so much. You have no idea of the smile that I have on my face for the last 35 minutes. This is really terrific, and congratulations. And the questions are definitely coming in for you. So as more questions come in, want everyone to know, keep them coming. You can keep typing as we go through these to answer them. One of the questions that came in pretty early on was asking about the length of the training, and Ed, that you did address that it is a 1 full day training for your employees to get what we would call a user certification. For the training that Ed and Kate got, that's a train the trainer model, that is a 2-day training that we offer. And then the recertifications for both are done annually. So we'll just get that question out of the way there. So Ed, I'm so curious, what do you think was the turning point where you saw that your staff were buying in? I know Kate talked a little bit about, you can't argue with the data when things are going well, but was there anything else in particular that you all sensed that sort of really flipped it for you?
Well, I think we started with our toughest classrooms. So I think that first year we did a February through June, I call it our trial program. And the reason why we did it in 3 classrooms was that was really all we hadn't budgeted for anything. So that was all we could afford. And we put it into our 3 most challenging classrooms. And these were classrooms where we had significant amounts of challenging restraints, not a ton of restraints, but the restraints had ended up, we had some staff that were injured. We had some significant injuries that we were concerned about that included broken bones, that included stitches, that included concussions. And that was really, one of the things in the back of our mind is keeping our staff safe with some, students who were larger, had histories of, when they got really upset, engaging in challenging behaviors that were dangerous. So I think that started it, when the word spread pretty quick that, we had some incidents happen, 11 incidents happen in these classrooms at the end of the school year, and none of them ended in restraint. So I think the seeing and just really the proof is in the pudding kind of thing, and I get it when, if I worked direct care for, 20 plus years, and I get it, nobody wants to, be in the position where they're either vulnerable to an injury or possibly injuring a student, So I think once that message got out there, I think the rest of it just kind of falls into place.
And I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
And like we had talked about, it wasn't always, sunshine and roses. It was challenging. It was tough conversations with classroom teams, and we role played and we worked things out. And I think, I'm sure some of our teachers are listening right now and they wish they could speak up, but I really think the turning point was when they saw that it was working in these tough classrooms with their tough kids. And yes, this does work without us having to go hands-on with people. We can do this, so.
Yeah, and, Kate and Ed, you guys both know from the training that, we, of course, we're going to focus on the students that we're serving, but throughout the training, we also do talk about how we want to focus on our employees, because, the whole idea is if you can keep your employees safe and keep your employees satisfied and happy, then it's just sort of normal that they're going to be much happier and more kind and nurturing and caring toward the students. And, all that just means being more patient, which, it's wonderful. So let's see some of these other questions that are coming in. So we have another person who looks like, let's see, she says, I know as a person who is using Ukeru for the first time at a school also here in Pennsylvania, my school has had a wonderful experience. We have had no restraints at all this year. We do have one skeptic, but we're doing great and love it. So, again, talking about people being skeptical, we were skeptical here at Grafton. We were probably doing more restraints than most. And we were the biggest skeptics, even when we were designing this, thinking like some of these ideas are a little off the wall. But I don't know. I think the creativity piece has helped a lot. Someone is asking if there's any chance that you could share, and I know we can't share it right now, but maybe sometime we could find a way. They are very interested in how you used your documentation. And I think you used a Google Doc, is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I just created a Google survey and sent it out to my teachers. So anytime they have an incident or they use the pads or a safe turn, they just go to the link and they answer a couple questions. I think it's 5 questions. I asked them about how long the incident happened, the time of day. I'm happy to share that. So.
Okay, that would be great, and we can work with you to figure out how to get that out to everyone who's attended today. And people are wondering a little bit, you said that in the beginning the families weren't necessarily part of the planning, but how did you then introduce it to the families, and how have the families reacted?
Well, I think one of the things we have our teachers do is we talk about this during their annual IEP meeting. So we talk about, hey, instead of writing it or writing restraint in there, we're using something else. We're using blocking, we're protecting. So we do talk to parents about when a student's behavior rises to the level of needing to be blocked, right? So they're aware of that. And I think overall it's been well received. I've had parents tell me they're so happy to hear that we're using this. And I've only heard positive feedback from families. But again, that usually comes up in meetings or, when we're talking about improvement of students' behavior. So.
Sure. We do have a couple questions here around seclusion, and I think we should probably just clarify that in Pennsylvania that is not allowed, correct? So you don't have seclusion and you haven't, correct?
That is correct. We've never used seclusion here as a method.
Okay. Some folks are asking if you could just talk about, I'm assuming they're meaning in your classrooms, and I know that you gave some demographics on your children, but in general, could you just one more time describe the population that you're serving?
Yes. So, I mean, we serve any student that has a special education, IEP. But, honestly, historically in our district, and actually very similar to the national data, the students that most frequently require or have needed management due to behavior that's dangerous to themselves or others are students that have a primary support need for autism or primary support need for emotional disturbance. So those are the two populations of students that we primarily implemented these programs in. So we've implemented the Ukeru in all of those classrooms that we have in our public buildings.
All right, great. I have some folks here that are asking how you manage self-abusive behavior or AWOL type behaviors, or running out of the area. If you want to talk about that a little bit, then I'd be happy to follow up.
Sure. Well, there are techniques as part of the Ukeru, training to deal with self-injurious behavior. We did have to get creative sometimes with protecting students. So really just blocking, protecting when students are grabbing or excessively pinching. We had a student with open wounds and things we had to deal with and involve nurses. And so I think that was part of it. And then just to answer to the elopement or running away, we would use what we're trained to use with the safe turn. And we would have somebody stationed at exits if we knew a student was going to run for the door. It's really, that's where the problem solving and team planning and talking about how to handle specific students and situations, how that really comes into play. One thing we did talk about though is if, a student's behavior rises to the level that we're not sure if we're able to meet the student's needs in our public school buildings, those are conversations we opened up with the IEP team. And so do we need to sit down and say, hey, with a capacity issue, are we able to manage a student safely in our school buildings, right? That's kind of where the conversation goes, I think.
Yep, absolutely. And again, I think you covered it. Yep, we definitely have techniques that we teach both for self-injurious. We can use the blocking pads to help with that. And again, the safe turn is perfect for runaway or AWOL type behavior. I had someone asking if you trained only the special ed staff or any of your general ed teachers.
It's a really great question. So our next phase and plan is to train our general ed teachers. That is like the number one feedback I think we get when we do a training is our teachers want, we're training the people that really already have a trauma-informed approach in a lot of ways. And so I think that part of this whole package, Ukeru, that trauma-informed piece and changing into a trauma-informed culture is so huge. And I think we need to share that with our general ed teachers, and that's kind of next on our agenda.
So we really haven't trained in some buildings we've had some of the building principals and assistant principals and school psychologists have been trained, but we haven't had many regular ed teachers who've been trained. So we see that as a need moving forward.
Okay, and how about some of your other sort of support staff in your building?
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So we have about 80 special education teachers. We have about 80 special education assistants as well who work in the district. So those assistants, many of those assistants have been trained as well. And one of the other advantages that I see to this method, the physical requirements involved in using Ukeru are much different than the physical requirements necessary to perform a restraint or a takedown to a position on the floor. So we employ teachers and educational assistants, many of whom are we have different ages and sizes and different levels of athleticism, and frankly some of our staff struggled with the physical techniques that were necessary to do a takedown or a floor restraint, whereas the Ukeru intervention seems something that people naturally pick up and do very, very well with. So that's been a huge advantage as well.
Yep, absolutely, and we've seen that again across the country in places that we've trained, that it really actually, I guess you could say almost it extends the life of a teacher or a caregiver in our field. That definitely more people are able to use our Ukeru techniques than who can actually initiate a sort of a well performed restraint. So, okay, so we have someone asking about biting. If you have students who have the behavior of biting others.
I don't think we've had a whole lot of experience in our short year and 3 months with students who are biting. But kids who bite others, you can use the safe turn, you can use the blocking pads. I guess that would be my advice. And we have a rule around here, and that's don't get bit or let anybody else get bit. So we really try to be sensitive to the kids who have that behavior. I
really haven't had that come up too much.
Kim, you might have better experiences to talk about biting.
Yeah, we actually run into that behavior quite a bit here at Grafton and some of the other places that we train. And, again, for folks who are wondering about the blocking equipment, we do have a variety of different sizes and types of blocking equipment. And we do have some that work really great, like our arm shields in particular, that are very handy for individuals that you're working with who might be biting. So, again, we definitely have techniques that we help people with. Ed, one of the things, and this is a very common question that we get in general that you might want to talk about, and that is how long does it take to de-escalate using Ukeru and these techniques versus in your prior crisis management system that had restraints?
I think that's a great question, and we learn in our training that sometimes the Ukeru intervention, if a student is that escalated, may take longer than an actual restraint might last, and we found that to be true in certain cases. So we have had some extended. I don't think I'd be able to say an average length of time. I think they range anywhere from under a minute to up to an hour or more than an hour for an extended incident. I'd say, we've carefully watched some of the cases when it's been longer, and we have seen them dramatically decrease in a relatively short amount of time. So I guess in general that we have had some longer episodes, and in fact we've had people comment to us, well, geez, wouldn't it be easier if we just restrain the kid and it'd be over with? Not to sound crass, but that and that might be correct, but we believe that the benefits of not restraining far outweigh the time spent in a de-escalation.
And I'm sure people that have had to physically restrain students can speak to those episodes lasting a really long time too. We have some students that, do calm quickly, and some that can stay agitated going in and out of restraints for, over an hour. So that's happened too.
Mm-hmm. And I think the way that we would look at it as well as, the one episode may last longer, but the gains that you're getting from using these techniques versus a restraint, they're almost hard to even measure. So again, for us, one of the things that when we were developing this, that we weren't intending necessarily to do, but that became very real for us very quickly, is that what you're doing is you're actually saving your relationship with the student. So it may take a little longer this time, but the trust in the relationship it's not broken. And we feel that when we were doing restraints, basically we're in this horrible cycle of trying to build trust, and then a restraint would happen and you would break it. And then it might take you a few more days or a week, and you'd build it and break it and build it and break it. Where with these techniques, actually it's never broke. And it just, if anything, it just keeps being enhanced. Mm-hmm. So someone's asking if they can get a copy of the presentation. Again, yes, please. We will make sure that this is on the Ukeru Systems website probably by the end of this week, and folks can check out this whole webinar again. Folks are also asking if parents can take this training. Part of what Ukeru offers to the organizations across the country that we're working with is that you can train this to your parents, if you would like, for any student that's in your system. So as long as there's a student that's in a school system or student at a residential treatment facility, that parent can be trained for free. Let's see.
I didn't know that, so I'm glad to know that.
And I got someone asking if, since using this, are you having to use law enforcement more often?
No, I would say from our end, in the classrooms that we're talking about, we don't use law. I shouldn't say never, but typically we expect certain behaviors from the students that are in some of these classrooms. So we try to, we feel like we have a capacity to support them. So our increase of, I would say it's a zero for law enforcement in these programs.
Okay. We do have, again, I so appreciate, we have some people who are making just amazingly positive comments and not asking a question, but I want to thank people for all the encouraging positive comments and really telling their story in the question boxes. We appreciate that. So we have people saying about how they're using the blocking pads to help with self-injurious behavior, or how, they're working. They're working to keep peers safe from each other. Let's see. While using the blocking items, do students sometimes find it fun or think it's a game?
Yeah, a lot of that always comes up. And honestly, in just one of these cases, we had a student where we thought that was the case, where the person did kind of seem to get silly, or when he saw them coming out, that would be a start to kind of I don't want to say wild time, but it would be the start of an event. So that was just a continuous conversation with that classroom team. How can we nonchalantly have the shields around without, having that be the first thing that the student sees? And it was really about just building up that student's day with positive reinforcement, using all of our ABA, the good things that we know to have the student be successful in his day. But again, it just becomes about keeping people safe in a crisis situation, and we're still able to do that with that student. And actually, this year that student hasn't had any use of Ukeru this year after using it quite a lot last year. So we're having a great start of the year with that specific student.
Awesome. That is great. So we do have someone who's asking for some clarity and around what is meant by seclusion and how is that different than time out space or time away. And again, in Pennsylvania, that is, the seclusion is not even on the table, but unfortunately, in several states, seclusion is still allowed. And the biggest difference when you talk about actual seclusion is it's typically a space or a room that the student is isolated in. So it would be an area where the student is put in. I really have never seen a child willingly walk to seclusion, put in and left. And sometimes when I say left, mean you may have an adult outside holding a door shut or looking in a window. But for many students, seclusion can be somewhat traumatizing. And so again, Ukeru, when we developed these techniques, the whole idea was to utilize them as an alternative to restraint and seclusion. So if you are using seclusion somewhere, please know that Ukeru could help you with minimizing or even eliminating that use as well. Again, we have people asking about getting answers to these questions that they missed some of the questions and would like to know if there's going to be an opportunity to get those answered. So what we can do is sometimes what we'll do is we'll take these questions and we'll actually write answers to them, and then in a follow-up email we'll try to get them out to everyone. Let's see, there is another. Some person here is asking about your ABA platform. If you could just briefly talk about what that looks like.
Well, we employ a board certified behavior analyst, and we're lucky in the area that we live in. We have a lot of agencies here that employ BCBAs as well, who contract with families. So I think in Pennsylvania anyways, our positive behavior support plans are required to be based on a functional behavior assessment. So when I say behavior platform, it's really mandated by the state that our students, that our behavior programs are all based upon, antecedent and consequence positive contingencies that are directly related to the function of the behavior. So that's what I mean when I say we have a behaviorally based platform.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I'm just going to see here if we have any other questions creeping in. Okay, so in order to make sure that we stay very sensitive to everyone's time, it looks like we're nearing 4 o'clock here. Again, I can't thank enough you, Ed and Kate, for joining us. It's been a pleasure for Ukeru Systems to work with you guys for the last couple years. You've been amazing. We so appreciate your passion to bring this to Pennsylvania, and your help in spreading the word across the state of Pennsylvania has been incredible, so we thank you for that. To everyone who has joined us, thank you so much. Please keep on the lookout for more webinars from us. If there's anything that we could do to help you in your area, please give us a call or send us an email. And again, we'll make sure to have this webinar posted on our website for you, and we will be sending out a follow-up email to all participants with some further information about how to get a certificate or how to be able to access the continuing education credits. So again, thank you to our presenters, and thanks for everyone who joined, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.